This is MakerGalaxy.
We're always talking about the future of design, the future of technology, the future of making. In a world where smart air conditioners can turn themselves on or off based on your GPS location. A world where 11-year-olds are creating successfully crowdfunded products. How do we find the next big thing? MakerGalaxy is a show that explores the crossroads of design, technology, and the future of making. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Simon Martin, and this week we talked e-ink with the founder of an e-ink inspired design firm, 1224. Andy Mitchelides is not only a seasoned veteran in the e-ink industry, having helped develop products ranging from e-readers to smartwatches, but is also the project manager for the largest manufactured e-ink display to date, the ClockONE. We'll talk with Andy about everything from how he got his start in product design with a background in marketing, how he developed the behemoth ClockONE display, to how his design team approaches working with e-ink and more. Today's episode is brought to you by the new Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer. Offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors, the Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com. Welcome, Andy. We'll get into the ClockONE in a little bit, but before we do, we want to know, you live in Boston. Where can we find the best lobster roll?
The best lobster roll in Boston? That's a tough question. I would probably recommend Neptune Oyster in the North End. Although it's a very expensive lobster roll, they serve it two ways. You can get it traditional, which is cold with mayonnaise, or hot with hot drawn butter, and they serve it with a side of fresh cut French fries. It's the best. Line out the door every day. So.
That sounds like heaven, and I haven't even had lunch yet, so that just sounds delicious. So Andy, before we go any further, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is?
Sure. I live here in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm originally from right outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and I've spent about the past decade working in new product development and commercialization. So I've been fortunate to lead a lot of exciting products from, idea stage all the way up through global launch, both consumer and commercial products. And so I spent the past 4 years working at E-Ink Corporation right outside of Boston. E-Ink is most widely known as the display technology behind popular products such as the Amazon Kindle, where I was fortunate enough to lead new product development and diversification in what they call their segmented business unit. And so our last product we launched successfully was what we call the CST01, which is the world's thinnest watch, which is a fully electronic watch that is about 0.8 millimeters thick. Wow. And weighs less than 4 pennies.
So you went to school for industrial design, or?
I actually went to school. I went to Miami, Ohio, business school. I graduated with a marketing degree and a minor in entrepreneurship. And my background is actually in socially conscious T-shirt distribution company. And so when I moved up to Boston, I got plugged into the high-tech startup scene with really no technology background or engineering experience, and kind of quickly was thrown into the chaos of product management and program management, which has, led me to stick with hardware for a really long time now.
So you came from a marketing background. So are you actually developing products today, like sketching and working in CAD, or?
So I'm not doing the actual CAD work or the 3D renderings and the industrial design side. Very much in the category of complex product and program management, where I'm managing a whole bunch of resources to execute on product roadmap that we would put together. And so very much deeply involved in the decisions that go into product design and product development, and at the end of the day, hold the bag. But, built an incredible team around me of industrial designers and mechanical engineers who can go off and, turn these ideas into actual physical products that we can bring through mass production.
Excellent. And so can you elaborate just a little bit more on your background in e-ink? I mean, how did you even get involved working with them?
Yeah, so at the time I was at a startup right outside of Boston called Zinc Imaging. Zinc stands for Zero Ink. They invented full-color inkless printing. And that was the first major technology that I got to have a strong leadership role, from technology through product commercialization. And, being a local hardware startup or technology startup here in Boston, managed to get connected with a few people at E-Ink who at the time was focused primarily on supporting the growth of the e-reader market. And so I had a unique opportunity to join the company to focus on diversification or new applications beyond the ebook, and looking at getting e-ink inside products for primary and secondary display uses, everything from watches to Bluetooth sound docks to now even medical devices.
And so what are some of the challenges of working with e-ink that people, including product designers, just may not even be familiar with? I mean, whether it's a smartwatch or an e-reader, e-ink is one of those things that people just kind of look at and go, oh, it works. But can you give us a rundown of how e-ink actually works for those who might not know?
Yeah, so for your first question, I think what's interesting about e-ink is there's two types of product engineers and designers that we would work with. From my experience, the vast majority are actually looking for low power, ultra thin displays for their product roadmap, in which they most likely aren't using a display technology today. And so there is a little bit of a learning curve with that particular segment of users on how to incorporate any display into your product. The second category is naturally e-ink is a competitive technology to displays such as LCDs, and different than LCD, e-ink is a bistable technology. So what that essentially means is you only need to use power to switch the display. When you think of the Amazon Kindle, anytime you're reading a page, the product's actually drawing essentially zero power versus an LCD is always on. So just getting engineers and product designers familiar with the differences of our technology, as well as the benefits of the technology, is a big part of, or a big opportunity for e-ink. But at the high level, the way I describe e-ink, which might be a little bit non-technical, but that's okay, is if you think of, the old school magna doodles or etch-a-sketches where you manage to move, magnetized ink to the surface and it essentially suspends, there's no battery or power cord in that product. E-ink's very similar. We use plus and minus electrical charges to move essentially black and white ink pigments that are suspended. And so when you're able to move ink, such as the black ink, to the top surface, if you were to unplug the power cord, the ink would actually remain at the top of the surface, giving you full readability. And so some of the disruptive benefits of incorporating e-ink into your product are you're able to put displays where power or space limitations had previously made it essentially impossible to do so before. So everything from battery-powered products to any, ID-driven product where spacing is an issue. E-ink has some tremendous disruptive benefits that could, really enhance the product.
Definitely. And so on the note of the product design side, you found a gap in the market between design firms and e-ink technology, in which you founded 1224. So can you tell us a little bit more about 1224 and what you guys are all about?
Yeah, so one of the areas that I worked on quite a bit while I was at E-Ink was developing concepts which had high manufacturing feasibility to highlight what you could do with E-Ink. Now, these were just, product concepts at the rendering level, but it managed to pick up a lot of interest in what you could do with E-Ink. And so through that project, I got to work with a whole bunch of design firms over the past few years to create really cool concepts. One of those concepts incubated out of a discussion with a firm out of San Francisco called Lenart Studios. And Chris Lenart, who's the founder of Lenart Studios, I've known for a very, very long time. And when we first sat down to look at what you could do with e-ink, we approached kind of the product development or idea development cycle very differently, which is instead of starting with, hey, what products do we want to come up with, we started with what you could do with e-ink that you literally could not do with any other display technology.
Totally.
Some of those things that you can do with e-ink include things like, essentially any two-dimensional shape you could draw on paper could probably be manufactured into a display. E-ink as a material is flexible. It's super thin. We're talking about as thin as a credit card in some cases, and really, really low power. And through that, one of the ideas that came out of our brainstorm was, hey, wouldn't it be really cool if we could make this near flush to the wall concept or product essentially a wall clock, right? The original concept even went as radical as just kind of a peel and stick, almost wallpaper-like application for e-ink. And so it was an idea that incubated almost 3 years ago that we continue to see interest through the website, people asking to buy it, but it was really just a concept. And the concepts are out on the website for really anyone to become inspired and ultimately bring to market. And so about this time last year, I was given the opportunity to take that concept and start to really explore the feasibility of designing this large-scale, ultra-thin clock that really is designed around the capabilities of e-ink technology. And as a result, we now have created our first product, what we call ClockONE, which is a true 1 meter long wall clock that runs off a single coin cell battery that lasts over a year. And we introduced ClockONE at the International Consumer Electronics Show earlier this year, had a huge launch, and as a result, spun the entire business out of e-ink, which we now are running under the company 1224, where our business model is to create new products inspired by e-ink with leading design firms such as Lenart Studios.
So now, I haven't personally seen one of these in person, but from what I have gathered from watching videos, this thing is not only huge, but incredibly light. So what were some of the challenges of creating an e-ink display of this size? Or did you kind of know that once you hit upon this large scale, it was completely scalable, the design was as scalable as you wanted it to be?
Sure. So I think one of the things that makes the product totally cool is, yes, you have this very large scale, 1 meter in length clock that is only 4 millimeters thick and weighs about 3 pounds. And at that weight, what makes it even more impressive is that the rear housing is actually made out of solid aluminum. And so different than most of your consumer electronic products, which are made out of injection molded plastic parts, this is actually a solid piece of aluminum. And so to get to that thinness, stiffness, and weight while using materials like that is pretty cool. So I think some of the challenges which you learn as you go through product development is, there is somewhat of a curse of the 1 meter effect. And when working in a size this large, things that were maybe unplanned or unexpected in the product development process is, for starters, equipment. A lot of manufacturers don't even have the capability to be manufacturing in the dimensions of the clock. And that's mostly because of when you look at most premium electronic products that may be made out of metal, such as a MacBook, it's still substantially smaller than this giant clock we designed. And that has led us on some pretty interesting paths all the way to, for example, approaching people in Detroit who traditionally manufacture things like car doors or car hoods, because it's the closest comparison to manufacturing a part of this size, right? And on the display side, one of the opportunities of E-Ink is it is a very scalable display technology, especially our segmented displays. And this is really the first product that is pushed both scale and shape. And what makes the product, from a design perspective, very, very interesting is the fact that you have these through-cut holes through the clock, where we've actually punched physical holes through the digits of the display. You can see directly through the clock to the wall. That's something you can't do with any other display technology. And so, it's definitely presented some challenges, but any hardware program, would experience normal things like this. And so they've been exciting and challenging at the same time, but we've managed to, get confidence around our product design, and now are, on track to move forward into production later this fall.
Definitely. And so with all of this experience with E-Ink, what drives you to keep continuing to create with E-Ink? Where do you see the future of E-Ink heading?
That's a very difficult question on where the future is going. There's definitely some very interesting applications, which are public information, where people have used E-Ink in a way that is just very, very disruptive to a category. Almost at the same level that the ebook was to the book industry. And so one of the big applications right now at E-Ink is what they call ESL, which is electronic shelf label. If you were to go into a major retailer and see all the paper barcoded tags around store, imagining replacing all of those with E-Ink, in which a matter of seconds a major retailer could update their entire inventory real time with the press of a key on the keyboard. That category is extremely large. We've also seen a lot of pilots going on in smart cards. So actually putting E-Ink inside of credit cards, very much to replace the 3-digit code on the back of your card. So if you look at any of the major card manufacturers, you'll see there's been a lot of pilots using E-Ink that once adopted and rolled out. They're similar to ESL. It's a very, very large category. Me personally, for E-Ink, having worked on a whole bunch of products, I think one of the biggest opportunities for E-Ink that I think a lot of product engineers and designers don't take full advantage of is really starting with what you can do with E-Ink and designing from there, opposed to incorporating E-Ink into your product as an afterthought. And so what you'll find is, for example, if a company is already using a square or rectangular LCD display, and then come to e-ink because they either want direct sunlight readability or low power or maybe non-glass for shatterproof. A lot of times, the conversation starts as just a direct drop-in replacement. Here's what we use for LCD. Can you make this in e-ink? Versus really starting with what you can do with e-ink and just take one of the many benefits, such as shape. And you'd be hard-pressed not to find an industrial designer that doesn't get excited about being able to design a display that doesn't have to have 90-degree angles. You start to do some really cool things with half-moon shapes and donuts and through holes. That's really where what excites me about the technology is when you look at ClockONE, at the end of the day, the product only tells time. We've gone into an extremely crowded category and are trying to be disruptive by just incorporating technology and a totally different design to deliver a product that's like nothing else in this category. But it all started with what you can do with the display. There's very little invention in the product. In fact, although the design and engineering is super complex, and I don't want to understate the amount of efforts that go into making a product this size, the display is really the innovation in what we're doing with it. There's nothing proprietary about it. So I think what excites me is looking at other display-centric products where we can do something totally different because of the power requirements of the ink, the thinness of the display, potentially the shatterproof or shape of the display to create something from a, look and feel standpoint that's just totally different than what else is in that category.
Definitely. And you mentioned industrial designers getting excited about being able to play with a display that doesn't necessarily have to have 90-degree corners. And so I can only imagine what your guys' prototype lab looks like. But on that note, I understand that you personally are not necessarily a product designer, but in terms of overlooking the project management side of things, could you tell us a little bit about how you guys do go from an initial brief or idea to a polished concept? I mean, do you all immediately grab your sketchbooks or you start playing with the e-ink displays that are already in the lab? I mean, how do you guys get from one idea to the next when you work with this technology?
Yeah, so I mean, there's three high-level phases that we go through in product development. One is qualification, the second is validation, and the third is commercialization. And each of those should gate each other. So in the qualification stage, when we're developing ideas, we're not going and writing 30-page business plans and doing crazy forecasts on capturing some percentage of the market share. What we're really looking at here is, if as it pertains to starting with an idea, is there really a market opportunity there? What are we up against from a competitive standpoint? Where do we think we need to be from a price point standpoint to be disruptive? What can we do differently that other people aren't doing? It's easy to have ideas, but ideas need to be vetted. That's the short answer. The priority is going through qualification. What comes out of qualification in this case was ClockONE. The product that really required very little innovation, really focused on leveraging off-the-shelf display capabilities, and really focusing on really the design and engineering is what differentiates this product outside of the e-ink technology. And so validation is really that next phase of understanding, can we actually now make this? Can we make it economical? What are the challenges of going from 20 to 20,000 of these things? And, validation, it really falls into two buckets. You've got, both quantitative and qualitative feedback. And so it's great to pick up press. Our product's been featured in New York Times and Mashable and Dwell. But what does that translate into dollars isn't totally clear always. And on the other hand, which crowdfunding platforms have been pretty successful with, going and doing a Kickstarter campaign or an Indiegogo campaign, you're actually able to quantify, pre-sale interest on a product. And in our instance, we went to CES, which was probably the most difficult arena to launch a new product. And, next to 3D printers and self-driving cars, we decided to launch a clock. And it was really, for us, a big point of validation on whether or not people outside of this project saw value and were excited about this product. And fortunately, in our case, there was a lot of interest, which now has moved us into the third gate, which is commercializing. And once again, if you're going to invest money, whether you be a startup or a big company, into really any product, you should be doing it in such a way that you want to see a return on your investment. And so if you're going to go through the spend and resources of developing a product, if you get through your validation stage, really be focused on commercializing so you have a chance to, create revenue for that product. And so from the design perspective, it really all starts at that first stage of coming in from a design perspective and meeting the minds of the business perspective to say, okay, what can we do from a design perspective that is totally different or is going to create a new opportunity for us? And, although we now have ClockONE in a mass producible design, there were numerous other versions and flavors of this product that over the course of that process naturally weeded out for one reason or another, whether it's because cost was prohibitive or people that would be intended buyers of this product didn't like it, or the materials didn't make sense for it. And so that's the other hard part when you are design driven, is coming up with a single direction that landing on a single direction that has the largest opportunity for your product. Right.
And you also briefly mentioned about crowdfunding and Kickstarter. I have no doubt you guys are going to be successful on your own based on the interest garnered so far, but did it ever occur to you that maybe you should have or could have gone on Kickstarter to help quantify that data a little more, even if it was just to do that?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about crowdfunding is there's definitely some clear advantages. I think today, more so than 3 years ago, crowdfunding has been kind of become the cool way of virally launching a product, whether you need the capital or not. You'd be surprised, but names aside, a lot of companies launch on some of these platforms with full intention of going to production, whether they meet their goal or not, or they set their goal very, very low. And so my personal experience with crowdfunding is, successful campaigns at the surface are really exciting. You can see big dollar signs associated with your product. However, they also can be somewhat distracting. When you manage to pre-sell a certain number of units to your backers, you now have an obligation to manage that community. And when you're trying to focus on doing true hardware development, when you've got 10,000 people emailing you about where's my product, or have you ever thought about this, it's more than a full-time job to manage that process. The other part about crowdfunding is, when you are selling a product at the validation stage, it does limit you somewhat to where you're able to make changes moving into mass production. So I know some companies, for example, launched on a crowdfunding platform and stated that they were going to be made in the United States, and to hold true to that, ended up not being financially lucrative for some of them, or they pigeonholed themselves into it because that's what their backers backed, right? And so one of the things that was really important for us was we wanted to have the flexibility to refine the design to put out the best product from a quality standpoint and reliability standpoint without having to lock ourselves into specific features which we would have gone and collected money against. So
I think that was very, very well said. I mean, we hear so much about the hype of centered around crowdfunding, but that's a very logical reason why you would not want to go the Kickstarter route. So aside from launching the ClockONE in a couple of months, are there any other cool e-ink projects that we can expect from 1224 in the near future?
Yeah, so at this point, we're not announcing any new products. However, we do have a roadmap of products, built around this 1224 brand. You could probably make some guesses on where our roadmap is headed based on our first product. Obviously, coming out with a meter-long clock isn't for everyone based on size and price point. And so we've managed to gather a lot of feedback from our launch, and that's really what's driving these new products for us. But the other important part of product development is you've got to finish your first product before you really start getting too deep into your second one. And so relative to our development cycle right now, we're pretty heads down getting ready to ramp the production of ClockONE so we can be shipping product worldwide later this year. But, we definitely have our sights set on a second product and are excited, in the near future to get to announce that product once we've managed to be successful with our first.
Okay, and with that, we have one last question for you, Andy. As somebody who has both experience in launching a product as well as project management for that product, what is one piece of advice you can give our listeners who might have a good or okay product design idea that they want to get made? Where should they start? How do they get that idea out there?
I think my best piece of feedback I like to give is, test before you invest heavily is the kind of the kicker there. And, especially when you're working with hardware design that require things like electronics and housing and tooling. I mean, it's not cheap necessarily, but the best thing to do is to get something out there. Don't be afraid to be embarrassed of it. But for people to understand your product and the value of your product, it's such a physical experience that pitching it to an idea is good. Showing them a rendering or a drawing is better. But getting to something physical, even if it's duct taped together, is probably the best. And so figuring out the right way to do it without having to go out and spend a whole bunch of money is probably the best recommendation, because especially in hardware development, so much of it is fly or die that it's very easy to spend a lot of money refining things before you really validate whether or not people outside yourself or your team actually find this product valuable.
Definitely. Well, that is great advice. And Andy, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Today's episode was brought to you by the new Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer, offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors. The Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com. Thanks for checking us out today, and if you'd like to find out more about Andy, 1224, or the ClockONE, head over to 1224clocks.com. On our next episode, we'll be talking with Andy Kale of the online privacy product Ghostery about privacy and working with CAD in the cloud. I'm your host, Simon Martin. Stay tuned and check in with us next week on MakerGalaxy.
A production of EVD Media.